If you're going to crowdfund something, there is actually a crowd that's behind you. And one mistake I think we all make is that we don't think of it as a campaign when we've got a product or a service or a technology or a solution. And I think we need to address it in that way. So I'd put back to perhaps the speakers, what's your view on, perhaps the communication challenges around these issues, and reflecting back on, for example, building lots of new homes, and maybe we should have perhaps all got behind the SUDS idea, the SUDS regulations and the SUDS aspects of local planning. Yeah,
I think the satisfaction that we have is none of us are making another pair of jeans or a different flavour of vodka. Everything we're doing is solving a problem, and that makes it much more worthwhile. I think the challenge we have is also that there's a bit of a sense of purpose. And when you mix business with purpose, when it goes well, it goes very, very well. And when it goes badly, I'm under the table rocking to and fro. But yeah, I think that there is a lot of appetite, and we need an Enviro Tech. We've got FinTech, Clean Tech, Ed Tech. We've now got SUS FinTech. Let's do Enviro Tech. Sod it. Whatever it takes to get it out there. And again, whether the EIC has an interest in it, I wonder whether we should get together. If we're doing that round table with the minister, why not do the top 20 investments in UK-based environmental innovation and make a big noise about it and hopefully raise some money?
You're quite right on the point about voting. Is that one of the most scandalous things about what has happened in the political environment over the last 6 months is that it wasn't in the manifesto. No one voted for it. The policy changes that have been made, with the exception of the blocking of onshore wind, wasn't there. So it was that's one of the most thing that people I think are most upset about across many of the environmental industries. It's not that it's happened. If you win an election on that mandate, fair enough, but it wasn't in the manifesto. And I think that's you're quite right. Is that there's a huge centre ground that's massively behind this industry, that's far too quiet about how supportive it is. And politicians, as a result, get an easy ride because people are understandably concerned about other issues. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to sort of just slightly broaden it, because it may be absolutely right that if you're sitting in front of the minister to talk about the investment opportunities, the job opportunities, the export opportunities, the success of the sector, but there's another set of narratives that I think we are all, broadly missing, which is in order to get the crowd behind us, let's not talk about the technology, let's talk about what the technologies do for us and do for society. So we don't talk about electric vehicles, because apart from nerds, they're not really interested in it. What they're interested in is you're not killing somebody's kids by poor air quality in city centres. We don't really want to talk about ventilation systems or insulation. We want to talk about the fact that this has a massively positive impact in terms of social justice, health outcomes, social cohesion. These are the narratives that get politicians on the back foot. Because, hey, nobody actually necessarily, apart from people in this room, vote for the investment jobs export piece, but actually everybody looks at those other wider issues. And I think that's where the balance of narrative between technology and sector success and social cohesion has a real bridge, and I just think we're missing a big trick.
It does tend to be the case that early adopters of technologies are slightly geeky, and the early adopters are in no way representative of the mass that come behind. But if you want to get cash into these early stages, then it's very likely to be, I'm afraid, a white, male, middle-class, 50-year-old individual that's doing it as of today. So I think we need to just, horses for courses. There's no point. We had a meeting with 9 Conservative MPs yesterday who accused me of being a subsidy-soaking, let's not even go there. It is about understanding the agenda people you're speaking to. So I totally agree. Yeah, no, when you talk about technology, you have to reveal the benefit it can bring. But I test drove a Tesla on Friday, and I'm telling you, it was just sexy kit. It had nothing to do with the environment whatsoever. It just went really fast.
I think one of the biggest challenges in emerging opportunities is actually everybody who is trying to sell something in that emerging opportunity sees the others as competitors, and as a result of that, they send mixed messages to the market. I think the most successful growth areas are the ones that have recognised that they are competitors, but they should, as a market, send common messages through industry bodies. and to government, because if they don't, then all they're doing is shooting each other in the foot, because the energy consumer, the funders, the insurers go, well, who do I believe? So that's really, really, really important. I can't emphasise that enough. We have energy consumers when the solar industry first started. So one of them had 250,000 square foot of roof space, and their head of engineering, so this is going back about 5 years ago, I should say, he would get about 50 calls a month from all of these solar companies saying, can we put solar on your roof? Probably the first 15 calls, he was like, this sounds really interesting. And he'd probably spend half an hour, 45 minutes talking to each of them. To be honest with you, by the time he got to his 150th call, and he was getting a little sick. And actually, what really bemused him is they were all telling him different things. He ended up taking notes and saying, well, one of them says it'll do this, one of them says do that, some says I need to put money in, otherwise say I don't. And he says, well, I just don't know where to go. So that is really important. It can't be emphasised enough about clear communication and consistent communication.
Can I pick up exactly on that point and reflect upon the comments from the previous panel? I work with 50 long-term projects, all from SMEs, working in this sector, where we're doing research to fundamentally work with those SMEs on the technology and the business model that they're fundamentally developing. So they're largely in the space of the technology that's being approved. And one of the questions from the previous panel was, what's the role of the university? It seems to me that we do have at the university a real opportunity here, and UK universities are very strong, to precisely stand in exactly that space that you've just described, to be verifying the technologies, because universities have to be true to the science. They are subject to peer group review. And the message that we have to bring out will fundamentally do the testing and the data and some of the validation work for SMEs. I was also interestingly talking to a very large utility company the other day who precisely described exactly the same experience as you've just described, of receiving calls from many potential suppliers with interesting environmental technologies. And he said, fundamentally, I just put them on one side because I can't deal with them, because I don't know if they're verified or not. And I have to say, in some of the requests that we had to work with SMEs, we did have a few where we're asked to support research into the various perpetual motion machines that people were putting together. And there clearly is a need, and even amongst the 50 that I've got, not all of the technologies actually do work. So I think I would plead to you, and we're a sponsor of this event because precisely we want to work with business, because we think there's a real role for the university. I think also there's a second role that the universities have, which we've talked about a little bit in terms of accelerating change, in that we are educating the next generation of people that are coming through. And if, as part of the work that we're doing, be it in research or teaching, we can engage the next generation in some of these things, then we start to get over that reluctance that other people have commented upon about we do this because we've always done it before, because we're introducing potentially new people to exciting and interesting ways of doing things.
Yeah. Just picking up on that point about young people, Julie, you say the sector is a lot sexier than it realises. How does it start to realise, and how does it make other people realise? What practically can be done differently to get that level of respect and recognition that the industry needs?
Yeah, so I mean, to pick up on the questions, but the universities have got a huge role. Because it's such a relief when somebody has got that discipline, has got the peer-to-peer rigor behind it. If anybody in the room is an investor, I'm sure there are some here. I mean, I just constantly get ideas sent through to me all the time. And I'm 10 times as likely to take a look at it if it's got a stamp of having come from an incubator that I know or a university that I know. That's really, really key. For me, ed tech is like 6 months old, this idea of educational technology. And it can be superficial, but people like to feel like they're part of a wave of change that's coming through. And I completely agree with Michael's point that one of the weaknesses in particular of the renewable energy industry, and one of the reasons why we lose some of the lobbying, is that we have 4 different trade associations that scratch each other's eyes out at as many opportunities as possible, and you see it actually happening in front of ministers, and it's getting us nowhere. when we set up Trillion, I was a tiny, tiny little platform that nobody had ever heard of, and it turned out this idea of getting as many people as possible to put some money into energy was kind of technically illegal, and we had to change the financial regulations. Now, we got the 12 leading platforms, of which 6 were redheads, all were entrepreneurs, all were techie, all were fiercely competitive. And we locked them in a room, and I said, unless we go out that door and say the same thing to every person we meet, the regulators will divide and rule, because this is change and it's scary and they don't like it and they need this much excuse to close the whole thing down. So it's a really good example of the point that Michael made, is because we worked together and built that consensus and stuck to it, and month by month I am still beating up this. I'm like the mother of crowdfunding, telling seeders not to slag off Crowdcube in public, because if we all shout about each other's weaknesses, the whole industry looks like a complete car crash from that point of view. So I really, really believe at that point, it isn't that hard to popularize it, but I think it's when we start to connect together the bits of innovation which are happening in pockets and raise it up to the next level and talk about it in terms of what the world is going to be like in a 5-year timescale. People can understand those stories, and I think people with their own money are more patient and are more engaged, and the only way to break government cycles for investment, and a lot of the challenge here is just that it's going to take more than 4 years to get there. If you go direct to the users and more patient, engaged capital, that is one of the ways to make longer term change a reality. And it's a little bit of marketing, right? That's not hard.
Absolutely. Michael, you're just on that same question. What can be done to break through, really, to get that public and investor profile the sector needs?
I'm trying to think of something really clever, and to be honest with you, a lot of it is quite basic. You know, I think there's a danger that people think in order to grow something new and innovative, they have to also think of new and innovative processes in order to achieve it, where in fact, my experience, and it's only my experience, has been that follow the basics. You know, understand what it is your business does, take the time to do the due diligence on your market, make sure you surround yourselves with good people, leverage off the relationships that you might have to get in front of stakeholders, whether that be funders, energy consumers, whoever it might be. I'm really struggling to kind of say there's some silver bullet. Yeah. It's not. It's just hard work, being prepared. Sorry, Alison, I know I'm taking your question. I just want to make my final point, which is Patrick asked me earlier about why it is that we, like many of you, support EIC. And it's because I think EIC, and Matthew, I'll take my commission afterwards, can play quite an important role to basically to kind of get that information on what it is we all want as an industry, and send that combined message. So if we think there are innovative things that aren't happening in the sector in terms of technology or solutions that aren't tech-based but are perhaps business process-based, that's what the EIC should be doing, is to saying to you, tell me what's wrong and what common messages we'll be sending to market, and what help do you need to kind of grow your business, and the basics that are needed.
If there's one piece of advice, is to attach what you've got to somebody's existing agenda. So if you want to get press coverage, nobody has any interest in your press release. You need to find out what they are writing about anyway, and then retrofit what you've got to meet that. So tap into the government policies, tap into the features, editors, plans. Don't think about what you've got. Try and position what you've got as supporting what they already care about.
And just to finish off here, because I'm mindful it is lunchtime.
Yeah, I just really add one thing to the specific question about how we engage young people in the agenda, because they're, to the gentleman's point from Lancaster, they're the ones who are going to carry the torch going forward. I think we'd do pretty well just to actually look at what other sectors are doing extremely well, whether that be the automotive industry, whether that be the IT industry. They're actually it's really recognisable that they're in the places, they're in the channels, they're giving the narratives that young people are responding to. So they're not giving them the technical message necessarily. They are, quite right, to the early adopters, But actually what they're saying is, this is what the technology can do for you and for us societally. And certainly working in an organisation where 80% of my staff are under 35, the millennials are only interested in that. They're not interested in what I want to tell them about technology or how it was in the dark ages. They're actually interested in what they're going to do going forward. So you've got to be there where they are, or else you miss it.
There are exceptions, but as a general rule, this sector, PR and marketing, is absolutely terrible. It's awful. I mean, really, it makes, as a journalist, it makes your... Journalists are lazy, right, as a rule. Beyond lazy. They want it handed to them on a plate. This industry makes it so hard to find the stories. They're hidden in the 4th paragraph of press releases. You have to spin and work to find everything. You have to ring people up and speak to them, which, again, journalists are lazy. They actually don't like to do that. You have this image of journalists as sort of like being these people in the Watergate chasing these things down. Most don't. They want it handed to them. This information is not handed to them by this industry. You have to really work for it. You have to talk to people. You talk to them for 20 minutes and then they'll tell you something beyond fascinating, something so staggeringly cool. And you've wasted 20 minutes to get to that point, and then you've got the story. And that whole PR and communications agenda is ignored by entrepreneurs because it's not their skill set. And they don't hire people who know how to do it because quite often they don't necessarily have the funding. It is difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but the industries that do this well spend a huge amount more and put a huge amount more value in that PR and marketing agenda, because it means that people know what you're doing, they know what the market is, and then it makes it a lot harder for politicians to kill it because people care. And the core story, and the reason I continue to work at Business Green and will do cover this sector for as long as my career continues, is that the stuff at the basics, at the core, is so cool. It's so phenomenally important, whether you're a tech geek or you care about the social issues. We're running technology awards next week. We had over 200 entries. I mean, there's things in there like robots that fit insulation. There's kites that work at high altitude that generate energy. I mean, this is sci-fi, staggeringly cool stuff. The boring stuff's really cool. I mean, the stuff that saves you money on your energy bills. It's phenomenally interesting, and this sector as a whole just doesn't tell that story. And my final point would be, I always apply the front page of the FT test. Last week, when Modi was over, there was about £10 billion worth of deals, I think, signed. About 3 or 4 of them were clean tech. There was a big solar deal and a huge fuel cell deal. No bugger knows. If that had been pharmaceuticals, that's the front page of the FT. If that had been aerospace, that's the front page of the FT. As it was, because it's solar and fuel cells, it's a press release that if it gets reported at all, it's hidden on page 10. The industry has to get better at punching its weight, and that is absolutely crucial. I think innovation is great, but innovation it's useless if no one knows about it. Anyway, that's my rant over. As a journalist who spends far too long wading through press releases that have great stories hidden in them. So thank you very much to our panel. It was a fantastic session, some really interesting points. Thank you.